Have you ever wondered why the cost of sending a letter has increased so much recently? Or why you're now charged nearly 75% more for sending an A4 letter, even though it weighs no more than a standard size envelope? Well, we can thank EU Directive 97/67. They came up with this new system in a drive towards achieving harmony of European postal services so that we in the UK could benefit from, well, lower prices.
What it meant in practice was that the Royal Mail had to open up its business mail services to foreign competition like Deutsche Post, which has now muscled in on the lucrative bits of Royal Mail's market, but leaving poor old Postman Pat with the unprofitable domestic postal deliveries, trying desperately to keep the costs viable, but without the profit from its business post to keep it afloat.
I think we'd all agree that post offices play a vital role in keeping communities alive. Indeed, without the post office counter services, many rural shops like this one would be forced to close. And yes, the government acknowledges this and has set in place subsidies to ensure post offices can stay open. But our partners in Brussels have been meddling again. Here's EU Directive 2002/39. The EU Parliament insists that the size of the postal market reserved for national monopolies must be reduced and that the UK government must seek permission before any state aid is granted.
Hello there. Hi, can I send that?
As a result of this, back in 2003, the government signed away the Royal Mail's ability to control its own financial affairs, and a deal was struck which allowed the government to grant £150 million to the post office each year for 3 years. However, the cost of running the postal service is £208 million a year, which means there's a £58 million annual deficit. The government does not have permission from the EU to increase the grant, and so the debt is increasing, and matters will only get worse as inflation rises. Result? Closure of post offices all over the country.
The bottom line? You, the government and Postman Pat have lost control over the future of our post offices. Let's talk about what we get from the EU. Every year, the UK contributes a huge amount of money into the European Union. How much? Well, just imagine I'm on my way to Brussels without payment for the year. This UK truck is full to bursting. £14 billion of taxpayers' money. Okay, let's go.
Obviously, our friends across in France make a similar journey each year. When everyone gets to Brussels, their contributions are redistributed to fund all the EU activities throughout the Union. The UK, for example, takes back around £4 billion for various EU-funded projects, plus a rebate. More about that later.
So when we set off back to Blighty without EU cash, it requires a smaller truck. And there's Henri, with his rebates, back off to Paris. But he appears to be in the same truck as he arrived in. So what's going on there?
It appears Henri returns to France with 98% of his contributions, the bulk of which is destined for the French farmers as part of their Common Agricultural Policy deal, because historically, it's always been that way. This situation has continued for many years, and it's set to get worse. So far, the UK has contributed £300 billion, of which only £66 billion has been spent directly in the UK.
I just think they take the mickey out of us, basically. Especially this common agricultural policy. I don't think that's right. It should be worked out again, or they shouldn't have it.
That's my feeling, that we sort of play cricket in this country, and abroad they don't necessarily.
Kind of get screwed over, I guess, don't we? Spending that much money, what do we get out of it? Not much.
The hard-won rebates that Mrs Thatcher negotiated many years ago were surrendered last year by Tony Blair. Add to that the funding for the newest members to the EU club, and we're in for some very expensive years ahead.
Finally, the UK is putting more effort into eco-friendly ways of disposing of our rubbish, and recycling is becoming second nature to many of us.
This has resulted in reduced levels of domestic waste going into precious landfill sites like this. As usual, the EU is driving to encourage recycling, not through incentives nor education, but with a new tax. And the culprit here is EU Directive 1999/31. Another weighty contribution to the tip.
It dictates that by 2020, around half of UK household waste must be diverted from landfills. The EU has imposed a UK landfill tax of £32 for every tonne of waste your council brings here.
The impact of this EU intervention is being felt here and is one of the reasons why your council tax has gone up and why collections around many parts of the country have been reduced to once a fortnight.
Worryingly, some councils are now resorting to installing computer chips in wheelie bins in preparation for charging individuals for the rubbish they put in their bins. And it will get worse. From 2010, the landfill tax will have increased substantially, set to be between £100 and £150 per tonne.
Someone has to pay this tax, and it'll probably be you.